everyone. Welcome back to the Pulsing Podcast. My name is Pierce Fitzpatrick. This is part two, episode five, the Tommy Morrison story. This, I have a special guest here. This is Trisha Morrison, the wife and widow of WBO champion Tommy Morrison. In the last episode, we were discussing Tommy's legacy, his hobbies, and now, during the near the end of our last discussion, we were discussing his diagnosis with HIV, and we were also talking about the false statements made from editors from the Irish Times and the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Trisha, you were in the middle of it, and I had to cut you off because the meeting was cut short. So please continue, take your time, and say whatever it is that you need to continue for this one.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. And for those of you joining us in part two, we really appreciate it. And please go and look at part one because there's a lot of useful information there. So I'm going to continue to just delve into Tommy's medical information because that's something that the media focus on all the time. And it is something that needs to be cleared up. When I met Tommy, I had my 30 odd questions to ask him. Where was your test result from Vegas? Who was the physician that told you you had HIV in Vegas? And other questions like that, Pierce. These were more detailed than what the media asked, but to me they were important. So I asked him, I said, okay, so which physician told you you had HIV in Vegas? He said, well, no physician told me. Okay, so, typically, Tommy, when you're told that you have a disease, it's normally a physician that tells you, and that they sit you down, they show you the test results, they explain everything, they go through other testing to see if it was a false positive. Did any of that happen? He said, no, none of that happened. I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I got to the hotel room and and he wasn't even a promoter, but somebody who was under contract with Don King at the time, not even under contract with Tommy, had sat him down at the bed there at the MGM Hotel and said, Tommy, you tested positive for HIV. We got to get you out of here quick. And that's how it was told to him, Pierce. And if any of you have ever watched an ESPN documentary, you'll see that it's a really big scene in the documentary where a gentleman named Tony Holden says that he was called by the Nevada Commission and he was told to meet them at the ring side before the fight. And he sat down next to Mark Ratner, who, if you go back to part one, you'll see what Mark Ratner states. And he was told by Mark Ratner that Tommy failed his HIV test and fight's canceled. That's it. He's got HIV. So that's a huge scene in a documentary that's out there that's being viewed by 164 million people. Well, breaking news, shockingly, court records made under oath confirm that ringside meeting never happened. And the commission never said that Tommy had tested positive for HIV. So there's a lot to be explained by that.
Now, in relation to that, I would like to ask, why do you think the people, the media, were trying to spread this narrative that Tommy actually had HIV? Was there people that did not like Tommy? Could it be a bitter opponent that Tommy beaten? Or could it have been some, I'm not exactly certain, but could you maybe give some theories on why this narrative was spread?
Well, this was the first contract signed under Don King. It was a multi-million-dollar contract, and it was the first fight of 3 fights where he would eventually meet up and fight Mike Tyson. You have to remember, you got to look at the timeline. 1996, where was Mike Tyson at the time? He was in jail, just coming out of jail, ring rust and everything. This is how Tommy explained it to me, right? Ring rust, that Tommy knew that he would beat Mike Tyson. Okay. So there's that, right? Then there's the situation of the testing. Well, if you look again at part one of our documentary, our interview just now, you'll find that even the judge says that the test did not detect or diagnose the HIV virus. Okay, so what test was it, right? Then you have to understand, why was the suspension lifted after 10 years? So that question of, who liked him, who didn't like him, that's still really out there. And I think that you'll get a lot of answers in the official biopic, the official documentary that's called I Am Tommy Morrison. And there you will perhaps get a lot of the answers right there.
Okay, so my next question is relation to your is in relation to professional athletes with young with couples. What advice would you give to professional athletes with spouses that aren't really used to all the media, to all the fame? Because is it fair for me to assume that maybe yourself and Tommy didn't like the idea of fame and recognition at the start of his career? And especially yourself, when you were getting into a relationship with Tommy, did that idea kind of bother you at first?
When I met Tommy, you have to understand that he was poor. He didn't have any money. And this is in 2009, right? He had no career. He had no prospects of a fight to earn money. He was not invited into any movies, to be in any movies. He had nothing, Pierce. He couldn't afford his cell phone bill. He was still being given drugs by people that just wanted to see a old heavyweight boxer spun out on drugs. So my advice, I can only give advice of what it's like to be the wife of somebody who lost everything, right? And, I can give the advice of what it's like to be a widow of somebody that was famous. And it's not easy. It's not easy being the widow. And I've spoken to a lot of other widows as well. The widow of Marvin Hagler, the widow of Leon Spinks, the widow of Kenny Norton. We kind of all speak to each other. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on after a boxer has passed away, whether they were famous or not. And certainly at the time when I was with Tommy, his fame was something that didn't really bother him. He wasn't out there to be the famous boxer, the famous guy. He didn't want to change. The money that he made, he spent and gave away. He wasn't really, from what I understand and from what he told me, he wasn't out there buying flashy cars and houses and stuff like that. So I think it's a different situation with Tommy's life compared to maybe Vander Holyfield or Mike Tyson. But I just know that from the way Tommy was, he really enjoyed his fans. He didn't enjoy the wealth of it, the fame of it. That's not why he was a boxer. Boxing was his life.
Mhm. Now, let's move on to funny, wholesome moments. Can you name me any funny stories that you shared with Tommy while you were together?
Funny stories? Yeah, there's a lot of funny stories, Pierce. We made a point of always laughing every day, right? And we once drove to California and we stopped off at a gas station and there was a young kid there holding up a sign that he needed a ride to LA, and his trousers were down, right, showing his underwear. And that was one of Tommy's pet peeves is, no, you got to pull your pants up, right? Don't walk around with your pants hanging out. And so when I went in to pay for the gas, to the petrol to come out and fill the tank up, Tommy wasn't in the car. And he had gone to this guy that was standing at the side of the road. He just walked up to him and he said, all right, pull your pants up. How long have you been standing here waiting for a ride? And the poor young guy said, I've been here for about an hour. And he said, well, there's a reason why you've been waiting an hour. You've got to pull your pants up, right? So, Tommy weighed 220 pounds and he's walking up there telling this boy to pull up his pants. And I think in the end, he recognized Tommy. And so all that was happening while I was filling the car up with gas. And Tommy comes along, sits in the car, and we drive off. And I go to him, I said, where's that guy? Maybe we could have given him a ride. And he looked at me and he winked. He said, I think he got a ride. That was one of the funny moments. And there were just a lot of funny moments. We would walk through airports and we would always have to go through the TSA, the security checks, and go through those and spend a lot of time because all the security guys would want to talk to him and get his autograph. And there was one time we went into a store called Target, which is kind of like the Woolworths in England. And he, at that time, when he bought something or when anybody bought something and you paid with a credit card, they would actually print off a slip and you'd have to sign it. Whereas today you just run the card and you don't even have to sign anything anymore. And this lady pulled off the slip and she handed it to him and gave him a pen. And she said, I need your autograph. And she looked at him and she said, one day you might be famous, right? So you might as well start practicing now. And he looked at me and he rolled his eyes. He said, okay, ma'am. And he signed it, right? And she didn't know who he was. But just so many little things like that, Pierce, that he just was, it was just so funny. Yeah.
So the next question is relating to Tommy's mindset before a big fight. So at the time, Ray Mercer was 17-0. How did Tommy feel knowing that he had to face Ray Mercer?
Right. Yeah. Well, just to let you know, with every fight, and in fact, I had a conversation with somebody on Instagram the other day where they said they got nervous for Tommy, right? So maybe, Pierce, you got nervous before that Ray Mercer fight. And I said, yeah, he did. Even Tommy got nervous and he was not afraid to fight people. What he was afraid of is he was afraid to let people down if he lost. That's what he was thinking all the time. Because once you're in the ring, you're on your own and you don't hear the crowds shouting at you, he said. He said, you're on your own in there. But if you look up to the build-up of that fight, and I posted a lot of that stuff on the YouTube, the official Tommy the Duke Morrison YouTube channel that there's a lot of stuff there about what Tommy thought about the various fights. And there's a lot of the press conferences as well. So Tommy was confident that he would win that fight against Ray Mercer. And of course, Ray Mercer was confident that he would win that fight too. So that's what the build-up was. He was very confident he'd win it. And in fact, for the first 4 rounds, I think he was winning it, is what all his fans have said.
Mm-hmm. The next question is relating to Tommy's fan base after retirement. Was Tommy still active? Was he still chatting to the boxing community and towards his own fans even when he was in retirement?
Yeah. I think during the darkest years, I had obviously nothing to do with him because I was not in a relationship with him. So basically, any word about Tommy came out in the media or got caught for DUI or drugs. That's what was going out in the media. for his fans to read, right? When he and I met in 2009, we actually got on to somebody set us up on Facebook for us because neither of us knew any of that. You got to remember that's when cell phones really came in, the internet, having accounts with Yahoo or Hotmail, that's when things really started up. But you still had to pay for those services. So as far as him interacting directly with his fans, there was a lot of void there because you still had to pay to subscribe to be able to interact. But I just know moving forward from 2009, 2010, he did. He interacted with his fans on his phone, on his BlackBerry phone, on his flip phone, all the different various phones that he went through. And in fact, I've shown them on Facebook, all the phones that he had, and he would interact. And the one thing, P.S., he would always say, when a fan found him on Facebook, they would say nice things to him, and he would turn to me and he'd cry. He'd actually literally cry, saying, "My fans remember me. They remember me, Trish. I can't believe that."
Now, my next question is relating to how did Tommy deal with the losses and injuries during his career?
Well, one of the first things he would say to you is that he nearly always won his fights in the first round. So the injuries that started happening was, I think the worst injury really was that Ray Mercer fight. And that took a while for him to recover. But as you know from his boxing career, he went back in, fought again, and then also won against Razor Ruddock. So injuries, he actually never broke his nose, but he did break his hands a lot. And in fact, he does mention it in one of his books that from the first fight after the Rocky movie, is that he would constantly be breaking his hands. That Joe Hip fight, he broke his jaw, right? Well, so did Joe Hip, apparently. But Tommy went into hospital with broken hands and a broken jaw. And how he handled that situation is they wired his jaw together, right? But he got hungry. He wanted biscuits and gravy, which was one of his favorite meals, right? Biscuits and
Right.
gravy with the white sauce on it. So what he did was he cut the wires, right, to eat biscuits and gravy.
I'm actually not chicken gravy.
Yeah, and then they had to wire them back together again. So he used a lot of duct tape, and he used a lot of super glue.
Oh,
Anything that was broke, anything that was broken, he would use that. If a tooth fell out, and he had a tooth with Elvis engraved on it, P.S. Not a lot of people know this. He got super glue and he'd stick it back in there.
oh, the mental image is just wires. Oh,
Yeah.
stop it. So, my next question is: how did Tommy balance his life and his family, his career and his family life?
Well, again, if we're talking pre Trisha, he tried his best. And I think a lot of boxers do try their best. They're out there earning money, they're out there traveling, they're out there trying to win and focus on fights that it's sometimes hard to pay attention to any wives and children. And I know one thing that Tommy did say to me is that the time that was taken away from his family at the time to earn all the belts that he did earn was not worth it. He would much rather have spent more time with family than belts.
That actually takes me to an interesting interview that Mike Tyson did when he was at his house. So you mentioned that Tommy didn't actually, he felt like the belts and everything that he won were complete garbage. Mike Tyson actually had that similar sort of interview where he believed that he bled for garbage, and that actually leads on. Like, this is your personal opinion and your take on this. Do you believe that many boxers like believe that they bled for nothing and they would rather spend times with their family and just the belts, the fame isn't worth it? It's your in your own words, because you've dated someone.
I yeah, Pierce, I saw that interview that Mike Tyson did, right? Where he lays out all his belts there and he says, "This is garbage. This is just a waste of time. I bled for this." But then I also saw Tommy have one of his belts stolen from him, right? And one of his belts stolen and sold by a family member, right? That we had to buy back. And the joy that it gave him to get that belt back was enormous because he did fight for that belt. He did bleed for that belt. He did fight for his fans to get that belt. So, in one way, yeah, it took time away. But then when you actually get a belt stolen from you, then it starts to hit you. Wait a minute. I really did a lot of work for that belt and I really enjoyed having that belt. In fact, let me show you. I recall when you contacted me that you would want to one day hold up a WBO belt, right? And I thought, okay, well, maybe if we do our interview, let's hold up the WBO belt. Okay, I'm going to hold up the WBO belt, right, for you.
Look at that.
Okay.
It's beautiful. I'd
Uh,
love to do something like that, Trish. I'd love to
all right,
achieve
but
something as
let
prestigious.
me tell you the his let me tell you the history about this belt is that this is a replacement belt. All right, the original belt that you have on that picture of my husband behind you, that's the original WBO belt. And that got stolen from Tommy in 2010 at the opening of his gym. And it was stolen by a gentleman named Ron Scala, who stole it from Tommy and actually took it from him and said, "I'm going to refurbish that belt for you and send it back." He never sent it back. He then wanted to charge Tommy for that belt. We didn't have the money to buy the WBO belt back, and we never saw it again. And I tracked the belt down 2 years ago. And when I tracked it down, I said, "You have Tommy's belt. You know it was stolen." He said, "No, I didn't know it was stolen. I paid $5,000 for it. I bought it off somebody." And I said, "Well, it was stolen and I'd be happy to buy it back from you because that's his original belt." And when it came to doing final negotiations, attorneys got involved, and the guy said, "Oh, I can't find it anymore." So I never got the original belt back. I found it. I know who's got it, but he suddenly can't find it anymore. So the WBO themselves were kind enough to send me a replacement belt, right? Just before COVID happened. And so Tommy never got to see this replacement belt. But
Mm.
I can tell you that when it was stolen from him, he was so upset that belts do mean something to them. And he wants his belts to be given to his son. So my goal is, after everything's said and done, that his son will receive his belt because the time that it took away from being together with his son, he now will have a belt to replace that with.
Well, that's a great memorial. That's a great family heirloom. I must say that's very generous,
Yeah.
and that's very great of you, and that's also great. Shout out to the WBO. Thank you
Yeah.
much. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
for giving this remembrance for Tommy Morrison. It was very great of you to do so. So my next question, as relates to the Rocky movies. Let's talk a little bit about the Rocky movies. How did
Okay.
how did Tommy first react when he said, "Okay, listen, boss, I got a role for you in Rocky." How did he react? Was he giddy? Was
He
he
was,
over ecstatic?
yeah, he was over the moon. And Sylvester Stallone was one of his idols. He was actually in the Sylvester Stallone fan club. So to suddenly have this opportunity that he was going to be in the next Rocky movie, he wanted to pay them to be in the movie, is basically what he said. So it was just a huge, huge opportunity. He writes about it in his book, and his words are actually going to be used in the documentary that's going to be coming up. And you will get to meet quite a few people from that Rocky Five movie.
Well, that was I actually did really like Rocky Five. I thought it was
Yeah, good.
a very casual movie watcher, so I practically enjoy nearly every movie that's thrown my way. So,
I have I have I had never watched Rocky Five until about 4 years after Tommy died.
mm, that's
So Tommy thought it was hilarious because he would come up with certain things and he'd say, you remember that from Rocky Five? And I'd go, no, I've never seen that. So yeah, it was a great opportunity for him, and he thoroughly enjoyed it. And in fact, let me show you another belt while we're on the topic of Rocky Five. And this is the ring belt.
oh, that's beautiful.
And that was his, and he kept that. So yeah.
Would you actually be able to put that on over your shoulder? Because I want to take a screenshot so I can use it as a thumbnail for our interviews.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Three, two, one. Come on. Come on, work with me. Hold on a second. It's just ah, Grace, we got us. Fantastic.
You got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
brilliant.
And I do have a photo that I can send to you, Pierce, of Tommy with that belt on his shoulder as well.
So I have this. I have a an app known as Layout. So what it does, it helps, like, it can be used to split different photos and merge them together. So in the
Okay.
in the thumbnail for one of these episodes, I think specifically for part two, I'll actually have a photo of yourself with the belt around your shoulder, and then another of the screen of the photo that you'll send me with Tommy with the belt around his waist. So that will be fantastic.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. So let's see, what is the next one? Uh, can you give a little bit of an insight of what Tommy's training regimens and camps were like?
Yes. Yes. And in fact, I posted that on a Facebook, and you'll also see a training video on Tommy's official YouTube channel as well. So now, during the time I met with Tommy, and our lives were together, he would do cardio and leg workout, right? And the gym. So that he would still train even though he didn't have a fight coming up. So he would do leg work in the morning, he would go to the gym, do shadow boxing, and then in the evening he would do cardio. And he would do that every single day. The one thing he didn't like doing was running, right? But he managed to do the rest of it in his training regime.
Just hold on a second there. One, two, three, four, five. I'm just counting to see how many questions I've asked so far because I've kind of lost count. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I've asked about maybe 14 so far. And again, 10 minutes again. We've reached it. Time's flying already. I can't believe
I
it.
know. Yeah.
Actually, that's 15. Um, so I think I might be able to get two more before we go on to part three.
Okay.
So, what would you? Oh, actually, 16. So, what describe to me what you admired most about Tommy?
He was just a great character. He was totally misunderstood by a lot of people. He was the underdog. And what I liked very much about him is that no matter what was happening in his life, he still got up every day and still went out, still took care of business, as he would say, and he would get up again and he would have time for everybody, have time for his fans, have time for the little lady down the end of the road helping with groceries. He would have time for everybody. He enjoyed being around people. He loved animals. He always used to say, pets don't judge. He would give our dog the last bite of his bacon sandwich off his fork, right? He just was just a total human being. And and that's why I fight for him is because he was a human being. He wasn't just a boxer and a license number or a jail number. He was a human being and he had some fantastic qualities. He gave back to the community and he just wanted other people to do well.
And my final question before we move on to part three: how much did Tommy's determination to win impress you?
I think that he impressed me all the time. That nothing, and Pierce, it wasn't easy. I think that you basically have to be with somebody that says, hey, come on, keep going. You've got a lot to live for. So he just was, that's a hard question to answer. Our relationship wasn't out to impress each other. Our relationship was just to, get through each day and try and find out what happened, 10, 20 years ago and still keep going and still set goals. And one thing that I was impressed with was I would put a huge post-it note on the wall, big yellow piece of paper, and I would have him write his goals every day down. And what impressed me was that he started to focus. He started to realize that there was so much to live for, that it wasn't just about boxing, that he could still give back and enjoy the day and the future. So I was just impressed that with somebody that had lost everything, that that didn't mean anything to him anymore. He was starting to get back into life again. That was important.
Well, that is absolutely fantastic, Trisha. So, I would
Yeah.
also, just before we move on to part three, I would like to thank you so much for your participation, for your time, and giving me the privilege to honor someone that I loved growing up watching next to the likes of Ali, Tyson, Hagler, Liston, all the
Yeah.
guys in the past. I'm much more of a past guy rather than a modern day boxing favorite. I loved watching Morrison fight. I like I watched loving Muhammad Ali fight. It's a fun fact for you. When I was only about maybe 10 years of age, my father actually dragged me out at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch the likes of Tommy Morrison fight Ray Mercer, to
Yeah.
watch Lennox Lewis. It was hilarious looking back at it now as I'm 21 years of age right now. So
Yeah.
this is part two. I'm going to be right back. I need to drink. I need to get some water because I've kind of contracted a little bit of a cold, so my throat is a little sore.
Yeah.
And we're going to move
Okay.
on to part three, which is the final part for our interview. So I will see you in a bit, Trisha. And thanks to those that will be tuning in and will be spreading this all over the place.
Great. Thank you.